morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and the number one reason for it is that the country has been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF regime. We've had many golden opportunities to end the dictatorship, but has failed to do so. Because whilst the nation has risked livelihoods, limbs, and even lives to elect the MDC-CCC on the understanding that once in power, they would implement the democratic reforms. These politicians have sold out. They failed to implement even one token reform. MDC-CCC have been on the political stage for the last 24 years, including the 5 in the GNU, when they had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped Zanu PF rigging the elections. These are the fundamental facts that we've got to deal with. What is disappointing is some people totally disregard the facts and continue to pursue this simple and idiotic narrative that the MDC-CCC leaders are infallible and they should not be criticized. I've on the screen there some of the dialogue that I've been having, some of the people. In this particular instance, the argument was that the MDC leaders sold out by failing to implement the democratic reforms. And worse still, after the 2008 to 2013 GNU, they've been participating in flawed elections out of greed. They have conned their supporters to participate in these flawed elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they're only giving Zanu PF political legitimacy. I have, scrolling at the bottom of the screen there, a quotation from one of the MDC leaders, David Coulthard. This is a quotation from his own book, where he is admitting that the electoral process is flawed, so illegal, the rational thing to do would be to stop participating. But he also admits that he and his colleagues have been participating because they were after the few gravy train seats that Zanu PF was offering them to entice them to participate. And when you present all these facts to their supporters, they not only reject them. In this particular instance, the individual is even accusing me of being the coward who failed to participate in these flawed elections. That's when you realize that universal suffrage has not been a case, has not been a blessing in Zimbabwe, it has been a curse. Indeed, Robert Mugabe and his colleagues embraced universal suffrage not out of the generosity of their hearts, Zanu PF, while the white regime before it denied the blacks the vote, after the hoo-ha about one man, one vote, Robert Mugabe realized that to deny the blacks the vote would be very difficult. So he has embraced universal suffrage, but with no intention of giving the ordinary Zimbabwean a meaningful vote. On paper, Zimbabweans have the vote. In practice, they have never had any meaningful vote since the country's independence in 1980. In the 1980 elections, Mugabe, contrary to the agreement at the Lancaster House that he and his fellow freedom fighter parties would withdraw their operatives from the field during the campaign. He kept many of his operatives in the field, and they were given instructions to tell the people that if Zanu PF does not win the 1980 elections, the Bush war would continue. Needless to say, the people voted to end the Bush war. And in doing so, elected Zanu PF into power. And their number one priority after getting into power was to consolidate their power. And they did so by corrupting all the state institutions like ZEC, the judiciary, the police, the army, so that they all worked for Zanu PF to keep Zanu PF in power, to help the regime rig elections to stay in power, to help the regime deny the ordinary Zimbabweans a meaningful vote. So on paper, the people have been voting since the last 44 years. But Zanu PF has always said that the party would win those elections. And so the vote didn't count for anything. By the late 1990s, the people realized that they needed to implement some democratic changes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And they elected the opposition to implement those reforms. The tragedy is Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends during the 2008 to 2013 GNU when they had the golden opportunity to implement those reforms. He bribed them with trappings of high office. The E-Class Mercedes-Benz limousines, the very generous salaries and allowances. And for Morgan Tsvangirai, the US $4 million mansion in Highlands. And in return, the MDC leaders forgot about the reforms. They failed to implement even one token reform. And ever since the GNU debacle, MDC CCC leaders have participated in flawed elections out of greed. And they've enticed their supporters to participate in those flawed elections, telling them that, oh, we have plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. CCC would win big. Hashtag God is in it. All lies. Mugabe and Zanu PF knew that as long as they can entice the MDC Triple C leadership to participate in these elections by offering them a few gravy train seats, they in turn would con their followers to participate, no matter how flawed the process got. Because Mugabe knew that the Zimbabwe electorate had never been given a chance to be educated and knowledgeable. It was taking advantage of that. Universal suffrage, in a situation where you know somebody doesn't have the knowledge to meaningfully participate in the electoral process, it's totally meaningless. So Mugabe embraced universal suffrage, not out of the generosity of his heart, but rather out of mischief. He knew Zimbabweans, without being properly educated, could be easily conned into voting for the wrong people. Since the GNU, Zimbabweans have been participating in these flawed elections because the corrupted and incompetent opposition leaders who had sold out to Zanu PF them into believing that they're doing the right thing. And so now we have got this brain dead Chamisa Chete supporters who have been warned that the electoral process is flawed, so illegal. The rational thing to do is not to participate, to withdraw. But they still continue participating because they're easily conned. And they have the audacity to think themselves the nation's heroes by participating in flawed elections to perpetuate the Zanu PF dictatorship and perpetuate their own suffering. My late mother used to say that upenzi inyama yegakalo. The village idiots who keep participating in these flawed elections to perpetuate Zanu PF through and perpetuate the nation's suffering have the audacity to think themselves the nation's heroes. Even when they've been presented with the evidence that the process is flawed, that by participating, you are only perpetuating the dictatorship. There is no doubt that SADC would have denied Zanu PF political legitimacy last year if Chamisa supporters had not participated in the flawed elections in their millions. There's no doubt about that. The SADC election observer team condemned the elections as flawed and illegal, but they could not take the next step of denying Zanu PF legitimacy because Chamisa and company participated in those flawed elections and their supporters had participated in those flawed elections in their millions. Let's be clear here. As much as Zanu PF imposed the dictatorship soon after independence, we have had the golden opportunity to end the dictatorship in the last 24 years, but they failed to do so because MDC, CCC leaders sold out. But even then, we would have ended the Zanu PF dictatorship by now if the MDC, CCC supporters had not been so blind, ignorant, naive, and gullible to the point of keeping on participating in flawed elections, even when there is a mountain of evidence before them that the process is flawed. And that participating will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. Here is a video clip of Chamisa denying that he is a liar. But in this case, he was dealing with a more competent media who took him to task on that very point.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Akasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
Why millions of Zimbabweans keep on believing some of the idiotic lies from the opposition beggars belief. But like it or not, those are the people who are helping to keep Zanu PF in power. We are looking at 2028 elections. Chamisa is already gearing to tell the same lies to the same naive and gullible followers, and they will participate. If people participate in their millions in these flawed elections, as they did last year, then SADC will have no choice but to do nothing about denying Zanu PF political legitimacy. That is the truth. Thank you very much for those of you who were able to join me this afternoon. Have a good day.